Soccer, also known as football, is the most popular sport in the world. Men have been playing the sport since the beginning of time. But the women, they played their first professional soccer match on August 12, 1985. The U.S. women's soccer team won the first Women's World Cup in 1991. Since then, have brought home 2 more World Cup titles. They have also brought home 4 Olympic gold medals. This is compared to the men, though, who have never won a World Cup or brought home any Olympic gold medals. Yet American women's soccer players are still paid 28 to 60% less than the men. The first wave of feminism began in the late 18th century, and women were focused on their right to vote. The second wave of feminism peaked in the 1960s and 70s, where women were focused more on equal rights in the workplace. Women gained the right to vote eventually through their efforts, and some may say that women have gained full rights in the workplace, but that isn't the case. On the surface, it may seem that women now receive the full benefits of a working American, but there is one factor that is too often overlooked. There is a huge disparity between what men are paid in the workplace and what women are paid. Feminism is quite literally defined as the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of political, social, and economic equality of men. Political and social rights have been and are being addressed by multiple different companies and advocacy groups. But what tends to be forgotten in the mix is the economic equality issue. We have made a lot of progress, even dating back to 2010, when the median weekly earnings of a female worker was $669. But just 5 years later, 2015, it jumped to $726. But there is still a long way to go. In 2015, men's median weekly earnings were almost $170 more per week than their women counterparts. When the first wave of feminism began in the late 1800s, not many women were working in general, but today, women hold positions in almost all of the same careers as men do. However, the most difficult area to break into as a woman was to be able to compete professionally in athletics. At first, women's sports were isolated to horseback riding, golf, and croquet, as they were first allowed to compete in these events in the 1900 Paris Olympic Games. They were first allowed to compete in the Winter Olympic Games in 1924, but only in figure skating. Slowly but surely, through time, women were granted the right to pursue professional sports as a career, just as men had done before them. 5 U.S. women's national team members, Hope Solo, Carly Lloyd, Alex Morgan, Megan Rapinoe, and Becky Sauerbrunn, filed a formal complaint with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They choose to speak on behalf of the entire women's national team in accusing the U.S. Soccer Federation of wage discrimination. The women's team finally became fed up with the wage gap between themselves and the men's national team. They were being paid nearly 4 times less than their male counterparts.
The men's soccer team is getting paid higher than the women's soccer team, and there was a big controversy on that because, look at the women's soccer team winning the World Cup and the men's soccer team not doing as well. So I definitely think that women should get paid either equal or more, considering that they're playing better. I definitely think that needs to be changed or looked into more.
Hope Solo said, "The numbers speak for themselves. We are the best in the world. We have 3 World Cup championships, 4 Olympic championships, and the U.S. men's national team gets paid more just to show up than we get paid to win major championships?"
I think it's only fair to them to get equal pay, but the problem just doesn't stem in sports. The problem stems in all jobs. I believe that women should be paid equally in every position that they have.
In 1963, a federal law was passed that prohibited pay discrimination on the basis of gender. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 was an amendment added to the Fair Labor Standards Act that was enacted to right the wrongs of the unequal pay between men and women that existed back then, and it still persists today. The Equal Pay Act fully prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in the payment of wages or benefits, where men and women perform work of similar skill, effort, and responsibility for the same employer under the similar working conditions. Isn't that exactly what the women's national team is asking for?
I think it should be equal. They're both doing the same thing on the soccer field. Everyone's supposed to be equal. That's pretty much how the country should be run. And I think it's a good thing that, they're finally stepping up and speaking out.
I think they are asking for the respect that they deserve. They work their asses off. They do just as much as men. They run just as much as men. They do everything the same, but they're getting less. They're not getting as much as they should out of what they're doing for the United States.
Our journey to equality is not complete until our wives, our mothers, our daughters can earn a living equal to their efforts.
While both the U.S. men's and women's team play a minimum of 20 friendly matches, the top 5 men make an average of $406,000, while the top 5 women make an average of $72,000 a year. Not only this, but the women brought in $16 million to the U.S. Soccer Federation last year alone. Carly Lloyd, a 12-year player of the U.S. and a current co-captain, stated, "If I were a male soccer player who won a World Cup for the United States, my bonus would be $390,000. Because I'm a female soccer player, the bonus I got for our World Cup victory last summer was $75,000. While the men's team went 1-2-1 in the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, earning itself a nice paycheck of $9 million, the women's team won the entire thing in Canada just a year later, yet only received a team total of $2 million.
So I think it's almost sets a negative opinion on women's soccer in general. Like, to say that they don't deserve as much money as the men's did, even though they won the entire thing, it's rude. It's kind of demeaning.
American women athletes either have to be the best in the world or they are irrelevant to the media, a level of pressure that certainly does not exist for the American men athletes. Women have the everyday challenge of fighting their way into both the social consciousness of sports and into the media coverage. In fact, coverage of women's sports as a percentage of total coverage seems to be declining in recent years, rather than increasing. Women's sports are considered small time currently, so they don't draw big audiences, so they don't really bring in much money, so that's why they have to stay small time. But what we've seen with big sporting events like the Women's World Cup or Grand Slams is that if someone is willing to interrupt the self-perpetuating cycle of limitations, then the audience will be there. When U.S. Soccer released financial details at their last annual general meeting, it stated that the U.S. women's national team brings in comparable money to the men's national team, especially following their World Cup win and their victory tour. The women's national team is estimated to bring in $23.6 million in revenue by the end of the 2016 fiscal year, while men's national team events are estimated to bring in $21 million. The United States Soccer Federation also predicts that the women's national team will bring in a projected $17.6 million in the next fiscal year, compared to $9 million for the men's national team. Looking at digital stats compiled by FIFA, there have been 20 million unique visitors to FIFA.com's FIFA Women World Cup section, consuming 225 million pages and accumulating 7.8 billion seconds of engagements, 9 billion created impressions on tweets about the FIFA Women's World Cup. And the FIFA's YouTube channel held its all-time monthly view record in June at 28 million views, versus the 19 million they received in June of 2014, during the 2014 Men's FIFA World Cup in Brazil. A lot of people don't see an issue with the wage disparity because they may not know all the facts and believe that the men's team brings in so much more revenue. A lot feel that the men's team deserves more or is able to be paid more since their league has been around for so much longer than the women's. Others feel that the men deserve to be paid more because they bring in more revenue worldwide, even if they don't bring in more on the national level. Some took to social media to express their views. At Laura Ashley Dawn tweets, "This equal play, equal pay thing is really annoying me. Everyone knows that women's sports just don't compare to men's." At Cody Jackson also tweets, "If the U.S. women's soccer team wants equal pay, they should play the men's soccer team and beat them, or tie at least. Hashtag equal pay, hashtag USA Soccer." However, most people tend to take the women's soccer team side on this one. It's questionable whether or not some of the members of the men's national team support the women.
Do they deserve equal to the men?
It's tough to say. They've done such a great job, bringing so much attention to our sport. There's so many different circumstances that go into it as well. It's tough to say because, like I said, there's a whole lot of circumstances that go into it. I think they definitely deserve more than what they're getting now.
But you don't believe they deserve equal. That's not a yes.
I didn't say that.
So answer me, should men and women who play for the national team, should they make the same amount?
Sure.
But most of the men's team is more than supportive in the women's efforts to gain equal pay. Tim Howard and Landon Donovan of the men's national team have said that the women deserve to be paid more than they are now. The United States women's national team absolutely deserves to be treated fairly in all ways, Landon Donovan wrote on Twitter. Important to remember that these issues are and can be collectively bargained. Tim Howard said, "Anytime, no matter the gender or race, someone feels they are underpaid, it is a problem, and I feel they should fight for their rights, no matter what. Other than that, they have their battle to fight, and they should do that." Even Zuzi seems to agree with this to some extent.
You're not that convinced.
We're doing the same job, aren't we?
Well, that's what the women are saying. They're saying that you should get paid the same. So you agree?
I agree.
Social media is a huge contributing factor when it comes to the movement towards the women's national team gaining support in this lawsuit. The hashtag equal play, equal pay began circulating shortly after the lawsuit was filed with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This hashtag and move towards taking the issue to social media was really what helped make this lawsuit gain friction. Does gender discrimination happen at universities as well? Gender discrimination isn't only prevalent at the professional level. There are these same issues at the collegiate level of athletics as well. Although collegiate athletes are not paid a salary, there are still disparities between how the men and women's teams are treated.
They do get free gear that we aren't able to get. They get preference in times. There's definitely a difference, even though it's unspoken, that happens between the women's and men's team here at the university, and it happens at universities across the nation.
I do not believe that. I have a close relationship with the athletic director here, and he's spoken to me about all, the Title IX and all that kind of stuff, and everything that goes into it. They make sure that all the same amount of funding goes to both teams, depending on how many players, coaches, and all that kind of stuff. So I know that both men and women are fairly equal here.
For example, the airtime that the men's NCAA March Madness tournament receives compared to the women's NCAA March Madness tournament. The men's tournament is highly publicized, and filling out the yearly bracket has become a tradition for a huge population in America. This imbalance in treatment is very prominent at a number of different institutions, including the treatment of coaches. Bonnie Henriksen, who coached the University of Kansas women's basketball team, earned herself $505,000. Her men's team counterpart, Bill Self, will make close to $5 million this season, and that's even before his bonuses. Not only does the U.S. women's team get paid less than the men, but they also don't get the luxury to choose what surface they can play on for their games. However, the U.S. men's team exclusively plays on grass and refuses to play on turf surfaces. On multiple instances, maintenance laid down sod on top of the turf for a men's game, despite the high cost. The U.S. women's team only play on turf and don't even get the option to play on grass, even if they wanted to. The only opportunity the women's team gets to compete on grass is if the men are playing on the same field. Some think turf is cleaner and safer to play on, but there has been multiple times where women players have been seriously injured due to the unsafe conditions that the turf can create for them. Equal play, equal pay doesn't just mean something big for the United States women's national soccer team, but it's relevant in many areas across the country. Equal pay for women in the workplace has been a huge issue for decades, but it has taken prominent figures in this nation to finally bring this issue to light. Billie Jean King, a well-known tennis player, has experienced pay disparities since the 70s, where she won the US Open and was granted a bonus that was $15,000 less than her male counterpart, who also won. Why is this issue still so large in the 21st century? Does this mean that 100 years of progress was all for nothing? Are there still people in the world, or even in this country, who believe they can treat others differently just because they are the opposite sex? It is the 21st century. Today, women are the breadwinners for 4 out of 10 homes. We have even seen the appearance of more stay-at-home dads in recent years. More women are attending college than men, and women now earn more degrees than men. Here at Bloomsburg University, the ratio of women to men is 60 to 40. 50 years ago, men would have outweighed the amount of women in college tenfold. What are women doing today differently to make them earn less than men? If a man and a woman are working in the same exact job, doing the same exact thing, and performing in the same exact manner, don't they deserve the same pay? The United States women's national team has shown they are worth the investment by winning championships. And what have the men done? Nothing.
Soccer to me is my first love, I would say. I've played soccer since I was like 4 years old, and I like
how team-oriented it is for soccer, because it's really not an individual sport at all.
I mean, I've played soccer my whole entire life, so going to college and playing soccer, it's like a dream come true. And I mean, for me, I've grew up watching soccer, and just it's pretty much my lifestyle. So
I can't see myself not playing soccer. And it's just a part of my life, and I enjoy the game so much, and I'm so competitive that every game is just a new challenge for me.
Soccer means to me, soccer wasn't like a sport, it was more of a lifestyle.